It's just a car. Peter's grandpa Tony died in 2009 after 2 years of suffering with cancer. Grandpa Tony was a car enthusiast, and the last few years of his life, he had had the car of his dreams, a beautiful classic convertible. Even in his last days, the car was Grandpa Tony's favorite topic. On his deathbed, Grandpa Tony was adamant the family were to get his convertible after his passing. Since then, Peter and his family had all been terribly protective over this car. It was Grandpa Tony's baby. He bought it brand new in 2006 and only put 45,000 miles on it in the time he'd had it. He always made sure it was fully up to par and maintained. Not a scratch on it. Before he died, Grandpa Tony insisted that Peter take the convertible and make good use of it. Shortly after Grandpa Tony passed, Peter received the car. He loved it. The convertible reminded him of his grandfather, and Peter promised himself that he would keep the car just as pristine as his grandfather had. It was his way of honoring his grandfather. Just a few days later, Peter's wife and daughter were leaving a parking lot with the convertible. An old, beat-up Chevy rolled into the back of them. Not terribly hard, but enough to dent the bumper pretty good. It was an older gentleman, and he was apologizing profusely. He explained he'd just gotten out of the hospital and had been looking for some paperwork on his passenger seat and hadn't realized the truck was rolling. He was obviously exhausted and unwell. When they exchanged insurance, it became even more apparent that this man had fallen on hard times. Peter and his wife didn't really want to go after this guy. It was obvious he was very poor. But they also had guilt over Grandpa Tony's convertible now having a terrible dent in the bumper. Peter and his family simply didn't have the money to spare to pay to get the dent repaired themselves. And they wanted to stay true to Grandpa Tony's last wish. The repairs for the dent would be at least $300, and they just didn't have that kind of money at the time. That night, for the first and last time, Peter dreamed of his grandfather. He was healthy, with a beer in his hand, and they were sitting in the backyard of his house. They made small talk, and eventually Grandpa Tony asked if they were enjoying the convertible. Peter told him what had happened, and Grandpa Tony chuckled, took a sip of his beer, and said, "You know, it's just a car." Peter woke up after that. Peter had his answer. He felt the message came directly from his grandfather in a dream. Then, the most amazing thing happened. The next morning, Peter was having coffee with his wife. And before he could tell her about his dream, she said, "You know, I don't think we should go after that guy who hit the truck." With chills on the back of his neck, Peter asked, "Why did you decide this?" Peter couldn't believe it when his wife replied, "Well, it's kind of silly. But I had a dream about your grandfather last night. We sat around drinking a beer, and he told me not to worry about it. It's just a car.